Well, first of all, I would also like to thank the organizers, Professor Kellens, Professor Briand, Wouter Henkelman, and certainly Céline Redard for all the efforts they made to make this conference come true. So my sincere thanks. So what I would like to do today is to present you a sort of overview of what we have on religion in the Aramaic texts of Bactria. And first of all, I will give a short introduction to these texts. The Aramaic texts of Bactria have been published in 2012 by Charles Jacquet and Joseph Navet after a long publication history, which I will not go into detail. And we are talking about 48 texts. 30 of them are written on leather, and the other 18 are inscribed on wooden sticks. They are written in official Aramaic, as is normal in the Achéménide period, and thereby, linguistically, they can be compared to for instance, the Aramaic text from Egypt. But the difference is that there are many more Iranian loanwords and Iranian personal names in the text from Bactria compared to the text from Egypt. One could divide the text in 6 categories. So the first is, like many archives, the anomaly of the archive here. There's a letter of the first half of the 5th century, because I didn't mention yet the date. All the other texts, except this one, B10, are dated to the later years, to the end of the Achaemenid Empire, and to the beginning of the, let's call it the Alexandrian Empire. There's one text dated to the 7th year of Alexander, for instance. And there's also one text that mentions Bessos or Artaxerxes IV, like some people proposed. The most interesting part of the collection are the documents relating to Bhagavant. Bhagavant, who was an official at the service of Agva Mazda, who was probably the satrap of Bactria in those days, like middle of the 4th century and second half of the 4th century BC. There are also some other letters which are not related directly to Bhagavant. Then we have a list of supplies and names. We have one label, C10, and we have wooden sticks recording the debts. So now what I can tell you about this is that category 1, 2, 3, 5, and 6 will not be discussed today. So only category 4 contains some religious information. And with this I would like to stress, and I hope it's clear, that there are no religious texts. Not at all. So we have no prayers, we have no hymns or similar things. So maybe one could ask now, what is this guy standing there talking about religion in Aramaic texts while there are no religious texts? Well, I have to thank 2 of the scribes and 2 of the people who composed these texts, that they inserted some religious information, at least a little bit, in these texts. And that's just what I'm going to present to you today. I will be discussing religion on 4 levels. The first is the Zoroastrian Calendar, as it is called. Then we have religious expressions in the text C1. We have religious expressions in the text C3. And we have personal names, which also can reflect something on religious feelings in a certain region, in this case, Bactria. So let's start with the Zoroastrian calendar. There are, and this is also based on what Jacquet already wrote in his publication. So we have a first reference, which is in the Aramaic Texts. I think it's C3. We have two references to a Bayom Dalet Yot Nun. So on the day Dina or on the day of Dina, it's not that the two translations are possible. And generally it is accepted that Din stands for Dina, the Iranian word for religion, but also the name of a day in the Zoroastrian calendar, the 24th day of each month. And it's called after, so that it's a divine entity, Dina, Middle Persian Din, basically translated as religion. Here, if to insert something linguistically, I prefer to read Dane instead of Dina, although I inserted here in my PowerPoint Dina yesterday. But Dane, because of the late date of the texts, is more probably the reading of, well, or how it would have been pronounced when those guys cited these texts. So that could be one reference to the Zoroastrian calendar. Another reference, but now I'm going to be more doubtful, is the Bagaya al-Watai. Apparently Microsoft does not support Aleph and Ayin, so this sign can be, it will not be distinguished in the PowerPoint, Aleph and Ayin, so excuses for that. And for Waf, Taf, Yot, 4 theories are possible. The 2 first are cited by Shaket. Vata is the name of the wind god in Iranian. The second one, Vatya, is not plausible because Vatya is a wind demon in the Vendidat, in the Avesta text, 1014. But in my view, it's less plausible because a demon, an Avestan demon, would not be be venerated if these guys are Mazdeists or Zoroastrians. The third, again, Vata comes from Sims Williams, and he says that it is the day of the wind. It's the 22nd day of each month, again, in the calendar. So that's why I insert Vata in the calendar chapter of my talk. What I propose, néanmoins, is that it's for me, it's the simplest idea. It's simply to make of Bagaya al-Vatai. Bagaya is I have to explain this. Bagaya comes from the root bag, to divide, and Bagaya is what allotments, or what is to be allotted to, to. So Vatai is the recipient of something. So if you can make that yot, you have to explain that yot. So make it Vatahia, the ancient genitive dative Old Persian or Old Iranian, and then you have simply what is to be allotted to Vata. So you don't necessarily have to make a day of this name, in my view. So it can be simply the god Vata. So in that sense, we know that Vata is venerated, and that's some religious information too. Of course, as we all know, Aramaic alphabet is not always very clear, and a lecture with Dalet is also possible. And then maybe it would refer to the Daitya river, which is mentioned in the Avestan sources as flowing in Bactria. So then the geographical context is there. So again, I said doubtful. And the third reference mentioned by Shaket to a possible reference to a calendar is the personal name Dathushafarna, possessing the glory of the day or month called of the Creator. So that is again a possible reference. It can refer, the Datusha can refer to the 10th month, or to the 1st, the 8th, the 15th, or the 23rd day of each month in that calendar. Again, it's not sure, but this could be a possible personal name that has been inspired by the calendar. So that is the first level, Zoroastrian calendar in the text. And why, the question now comes, why should people use that calendar in these texts? So they like for instance, on the day of Dinah or on the day Dinah. But as you can see, so it's here, this part, the upper part, which is very clear and very readable. So I had a look on it, and the result is not much. So one could restore a text at the beginning. The line above is on the 20th Shabbat, year 2. So this is 20 of Shabbat, year 2. That is the dating system. The Babylonian, it's called the Babylonian dating system, generally used in this corpus of texts. So the Biyom Dinah is an exception. It's not the rule. And then it would say disbursements from a personal name that is lost. And then on the day Dinah, that which has to be allotted to, and then again, unclear name, it could be Washaya Data or something like that, but if it's a personal name or a god, as a god, he's certainly not known. So this text doesn't say that much. That is what I wanted to make clear. So I cannot give you an answer to that question. Why would they use two dating systems in one text? Is it because that's, supposing that it is a reference to the calendar, would it be that it's because there's a single religious entry and for the rest administrative text? Because the rest of the text is, also the clear part, is purely administrative. So there's no religion involved at all in the rest of the text. You have to realize that too. Summarizing, I cannot again give you the answer why these two dating systems would be used. But perhaps that the Biyom Dinah is maybe some kind of festival and has nothing to do with dating system at all. But I cannot give you more information on that. Maybe we have to find another 1,000 of these texts to be able to have some more certainty. The second level, religious expressions in text C1. C1 is again a list of provisions for Bessos, Bayasa, protecting against fear is a translation of the name. And within these entries of all kinds of rations and provisions, we have four formulas, religious formulas. We have the Zautra al Bagina Lebel. We have Bagaya al Zain Yot Resh Waf, to be discussed later. We have Bagaya al Vatai, which I discussed already, so I won't repeat that one. And we have Bagaya al Yashta. Or, if people prefer a translation, we have a libation for the temple to Baal. We have, and then flour and rations of wine are mentioned. That which is to be allotted to Zairwa, something like that. That which is to be allotted to Vata, and that which is to be allotted to the Yasht. So, what do we have here? Zautra, or Dausa in Old Persian, is known. It's some kind of offering, also tested in the Persepolis texts. But here we have a libation for the temple and for Baal, temple of Baal, or these, probably it's the temple of Baal, but the Aramaic says literally for the temple and to Baal. So not the temple, it's not the temple of Baal that is said in the Aramaic. Baal here could stand for Ahura Mazda. If we base ourselves on the equation of Baal and Ahura Mazda and the Babylonian Bisitun fragments. And within the Zoroastrian context, it could be plausible because he gets the most, 8 Ardap and 15 Mari. The others have less or minor rations compared to that. So this could be Ahura Mazda, and then we have God number 2 in our talk. After Vata, now we have Baal, possibly Ahura Mazda. Oops, sorry, to stay here. Then the Zayin Yod Resh Waf name is also something or someone that gets offerings. Although Bagaya is not a religious word an zich, here it probably refers to offerings too. And Zairava, Shaket refers to the Bactrian personal name Zer, which may mean either the intelligent one from Old Iranian Jira, or the pitiful one from Sogdian Zaria. Which Zer, Zero, in the Bactrian, the name here could reflect Zer, it's quite possible. But Zer is only known as a human being and not as a divine being. So we have here, in that sense, two possibilities. Or that which is to be allotted to Zer is not at all a religious entry, because Bagaya is not an zich religious. Or we have to deal with an unknown god. Or we can do a methodological trick here. That is, if we accept, and now I'm being cautious about this, but if we accept that the scribe forgot to write an R after the resh after the waf, then we could have the name, the Aramaic reflection of the name Zairivari, in Pahlevi Zarer, which is the brother, who is the brother of Kavi Vistashpa, and in the Avesta, with the help of Anahita, could fight it against non-Zoroastrian people. The name means wearing a yellow cuirass. And he also appears in the Pahlevi composition Ayadgar i Zareran, the memorial of Zarir. Now, two circumstances may plead for this link, although I say I remain cautious about this. But in the Yasht 5:112, the person Zairivari goes to the Bactrian river Daitia, already mentioned, in order to bring a large sacrifice for Anahita, the protector, his protector. And also the Avesta mentions that the Fravarti of Zairivairi or Zarer is venerated. So a cult existed for this person or this genius. Interestingly enough, if this hypothesis would turn out to be right, then we would have here a real 100% Avestan name, because the Aramaic inserts a yod between the zayin and the resh, Zairivairi, so it repeats the appendices typical for Avestan. Zairi, which otherwise it would, in other Iranian languages, like in Persian, it would be Zari and not Zairi. So the Aramaic would here reflect 100% an Avestan name. Again, if this hypothesis could be confirmed. Then Vata, and then Yasht. Yasht, again, a well-known word in Iranian. It's the passive participle of Yaz. So literally it means venerated. Is it a god or a type of sacrifice? Again, we cannot confirm because of the unclear character of the text. It's just a single line in the text. And this is about what I have to tell you on C1 concerning the religious expressions. Then C3 is even, we only have one line clear. We have a mention of offerings to the Fravarti. Quand même, very interesting. Fravarti probably from var, to choose. some kind of the souls of the deceased people. Fravarti itself, I said, well known, is attested in personal names in Elamite and Aramaic sources. We have Fravartipata, for instance, in an Aramaic letter. We have Baga Fravartish in an Elamite tablet from Persepolis. And of course, already discussed yesterday, we have the Irdana Pirurtish, which has been explained by Jean Kellens as Ashaonam Fravarti, souls of those who have chosen the good side, the side of Arta, Asha, and Avesten. Still, I would also like to mention the theory, not judging on it, that maybe we're dealing with two words, because the Irdana Pirurtishna, Irdana could also be a single word for Arta, and then for the Fravartis, I give it to you as an information, not as an established truth. And that is most basically the sense of my whole paper, that nothing is sure. Then Shaket also, so we have that, the Bagaya for the spirits of the dead. If you have a look at the whole context of that phrase, we see that various amounts of wine and some vinegar is to be distributed to some superintendents, an official in charge of penalties, a scribe, a person called Bagaicha, and then suddenly allotments for the Bagaya, for the spirits of for the Fravarti, for the spirits of the dead, and then provisions for the roads. And Shaket here connects the spirit of the dead with these provisions. And although there's no preposition, he adds a preposition for the provisions for the road. In my view, this is not necessary, because we are here, we have again an administrative text, and in my view, you should not add a preposition, but simply the provisions, the pashabara. Some of this wine and vinegar is used as provision for someone who is traveling for the road. A phenomenon well known in Persepolis, at the cube text and the travel texts, that people got their stuff while on business trips, one could say. And then finally, before concluding my talk, we have personal names, which also we can look for deities that are used in personal names or other religious things. So I have listed some names, possibly Zoroastrian because of the name of Ahura Data, or Zoroastrian or Mazdéisme. I'm not going into that today. There are also, according to Shaket, Haumana, he connects it with the Vohumana, the Avestan Vohumana, and Shatraka, which he connects with Shatra Vairia, desirable dominion. The last name, Shatraka, is simply a hypochoristic of a name containing the word Shatra, kingdom, dominion, empire, if you want. So I don't see here the necessity to link it with an Avestan genius, Shatra Vairia. I don't say it's impossible, but you just can't prove it. That's the point. The same with Haumana is also not certainly connectable, but it's possible. And then other names, certainly we have the deity Tyr that is mentioned. We have Baga, the word for God, also frequently mentioned in personal names. And we have also a regional element. We are in Bactria, and we have various names with Vakshu, the genius of the Oxus rivers. That is also that is something interesting that we see that like Vakshu data is quite clear, given by Vakshu. That so the Bactrian milieu is omnipresent, which is of course logical. There's also a name Margu data, for instance, which contains the element Margu, which could be the genius of Margiana. Conclusion. Well, what can I say? There is a limited information on religion in the text. So, in the sense of confrontation of sources, here the sources do not add much on religion of the Achéménides. We are dealing here with, or personal names, as I said, with possible references to a calendar or maybe to a festival. But what we are sure, and I'm, yes, I can use it, the word sure, purely administrative offering lists. That is what we have. And these are offering lists that are very comparable with the Persepolis material. They are not at all religious. They are not used in a religious context. It's simply they list what has to be done in an administrative way. And interestingly, as I say, comparable with Persepolis material, these lists are not independent texts. And that's also the case in Persepolis, where the religious entries are combined with administrative entries. So, unlike the Mesopotamian material, Assyria, Babylonia, there the offering lists are independent texts. You have one tablet, it's one offering list. Not here and not in Persepolis. There they make up simply part. So the intentions of these scribes were not religious at all. The business had to be done. That's why they inserted these things. Divinities receiving offerings could be Ahura Mazda, Vata, and Zarer. And we have the personal names, gods and names mentioned, Ahura Mazda, then the very enigmatic Chitra Char. We have maybe Margu, we have Mitra is also mentioned, we have Tyr, and we have Vakshu. So, to finish up, one could say that what we have of God's names and stuff could be Zoroastrian, which is not impossible because in the Zoroastrian tradition, Bactria is seen as the cradle of the new religion. But in this sense, what we have is Zoroastrian. That does not mean that the whole Bactria in the 4th century BC was Zoroastrian again. And these are my last 3 words, or last 4 words. The information is limited. Thank you.